Hey team, welcome back to the show. Today I'm joined once again by Coach Tass, talking through how to master the post-diet recovery phase to, in the future, stay leaner and build more muscle. So Tass, welcome back to the show. Really, this is going to be kind of a conversation around your season of competing, which I imagine most of the listeners are up on, but was very successful for you. I'll have you kind of give us a summary of that in a moment. But then also, one of the most difficult periods of time for almost everyone, the reverse diet period, the time when we're no longer dieting, we're working calories up, we might be seeing some of those shreds fade and how you're managing that. Also, a time where, again, when we're getting extremely lean, this is like below sustainable levels. So when you're like very lean going to shredded, so not applicable to everyone, but when we are getting that to that level, it's also a time where we're potentially a lot more likely to gain body fat. It can be a lot harder to manage things. So kind of a conversation as well around how you're managing that. But to dig into it, I guess any starting thoughts before we dig into your summary of your first season of competing? If not, you can just kind of hop into that. I don't know if there are any other thoughts you want to throw out there as far as the context of this podcast first.
No, I think you summarized that really well. So yeah, my first season competing, as we've said on previous podcasts, it was quite a last minute decision to take it to stage. Initially, we decided to do a photo shoot. So I had been in a build for 18 months to 2 years, really, kind of gaining at maintenance, a little bit of a surplus. And yeah, the time felt right. Also in March, many of my clients that I work with one-on-one, and the team know my beloved dog died in a rather tragic way. She was only 8 years old, and it was with hindsight, and I mentioned this to my coach actually, it gave me a great container for my grief. It gave me
Mhm.
something to really put my mind to every day when I was going through that. And I remember the first competition before I stepped on stage, I have her as my screensaver. And I almost couldn't do it because your nerves are so high just before you step on stage. There are people screaming, the lights are on, you've got all these competitors lined up. You've got to do your posing, which you've never done before on a stage. And I almost messaged Coach Natalie, who was in the audience, and said, "I can't do it. I can't go on. You've flown all this way, and I can't go on." And I looked at my screensaver and I saw the picture of my dog, and I was like, you kind of draw something from those moments in
Yeah.
life where you're like, "I can do this. I can do this." So to give you a summary of that, so we just kind of went into the challenge of a deficit, I will say, because I really felt like I needed that Everest, that marathon to contain my grief process. And sort of photo shoot felt like we were sort of halfway to stage. And I just felt like I wasn't done. Biofeedback wasn't suffering, training wasn't suffering. And I was curious to see how far I could take it. And so we took it another 6 or 7 weeks. I consulted my colleagues, my fellow coaches at Elevated Coaching Systems, and said, "Guys, do you think I should do this?" And they were incredibly supportive and excited for me. And so off we went. And that was the first competition. And to my absolute surprise, I did really well, as we've documented on previous podcasts. And it was such a fun experience, but it was such a whirlwind of an experience that I didn't really feel like I really put thought and time into what color bikini do I want to wear, and what's my personality when I'm showing my physique and my hard work, and how do I want to wear my makeup and all the rest of it. And so it was a bit of a tricky situation because normally when people compete, if they're going to do multiple shows, they try to do them very close together because it's really tough on your body to stay at those levels of leanness. So you don't want to be there too long. And unfortunately, or fortunately, because it was a wonderful experience, I had my mum's 80th and I had to travel for that. And so we did something that was another skill that I had to practice. I'm very bad at sitting with no decision. I like certainty. I like to know what's happening. That keeps me feeling safe. But of course, that often closes doors, because if you have to be certain about something, then you've shut the door on something. And actually it was, again, an incredible vehicle to practice, because I kept saying to my coach, are we doing it? Are we doing the next show? And he would be like, maybe, maybe not. So it was a really interesting process to do that. Anyway, I got back from my travels with my mom, celebrated her 80th, you know, kind of had a very, I still had a very structured eating plan. I still ate very similar foods. The Greek diet is, you know, very similar foods. We upped fats because obviously I was kind of very low on fats. Got back, established a baseline for a couple of weeks, and then we decided to go for it. And I feel like we brought better the second time, both in terms of everything that I spoke about, which was I felt much more involved in the process. I really got into my posing. My coach felt that he was able to tweak a few things in the peaking process with the carbohydrate manipulation. And the second show that we did was a much higher caliber of athlete because it was towards the end of the season. So it was actually a pro qualifier. And again, I did very well. I took the gold in the masters category. And it was a much more drawn out experience. I wasn't on the stage until 7 p.m. at night, which is really hard to keep somebody peaked all day. And it was a fantastic experience. It was 10 times harder on the second show.
Yeah.
And that was because I stayed that lean for that long. Systemic stress was really high. You know, hormones get thrown off at those levels of body fat for females, probably for males too, but obviously that shows up in kind of disturbances to the cycle, and frequently that's disturbances in the cycle where the cycle gets lost, which
Right.
for me was the opposite, and I just bled for a very long time. I mean, now it seems like it was kind of months.
That sounds
And
awful.
actually, yeah, it went away. It stopped kind of the week before, and coach and I were like, phew, we don't have the water retention of the cycle to deal with. And then the night before the show, it started again.
Hmm.
My coach was very supportive. He's like, have a good cry, and then we'll manage it. And we did very well.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So a very, very successful first season competing. I know you said you surprised yourself. We took home the gold at both shows that you competed in. Very proud of the way you managed all this. And it was really cool to see all your hard work from years and years now, like displayed like that. So again, really, really proud of you and how well this went for you. So from there, I do think this ties into, I want to talk about kind of like a high level overview of the plan. But first, I think this really naturally ties into why can't you stay as lean as you are right now or as lean as you were at the end of the
Mhm.
show? Because I think that a
Yeah.
lot of people see that. And I'll even get this question sometimes when I post like a photo shoot result from a client. Now, talking more so like this person got shredded, or like the few clients that we've had compete, or even like your own results will be like, so can they stay that way? Can they stay that way year round? And again, like, no, you were below sustainable, but talk us through like, why can't you stay as lean as you were at like when you went on stage? Because I think that's the physique that a lot of people aspire to live in all the time.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a fascinating experience for me because I've never got that lean. I'm somebody that doesn't find it super difficult to stay fairly lean year round.
Yeah.
Not that lean, but particularly in my upper body, which is of course what most people see because I live in the UK. So I'm normally in my lower body is normally covered, but my upper body
You're
is
in
very
trousers. Do you call them trousers?
trousers. Yeah, we call them trousers.
Okay.
Pants. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, uh, yeah. So, you just you throw me off now, Jeremiah. What was
Why
the
can't you stay
question?
this lean? And
Oh,
you were
right.
talking about how
Yes,
you
yes, yes.
stay lean pretty
Yeah.
naturally.
So I've never been that lean before. I got down to, well, we did a DEXA on the first show and I was 13%, and I dropped another kilo for the second show. So, probably like 12, 11%. Now to give you an idea, and this is very rough because it's different on different people, but if you go on the internet and look at what does 20% body fat look like, what will normally come up is this chart, and it's different for men and for women. And women need more body fat than men because of our biological role of growing humans inside of us and needing to protect them and all of that kind of stuff. And what you will see is that an Olympic athlete who is ready for their season, i.e. they're not off season, generally sits around 17, 18, 19% body fat, right? They still have to perform. So a stage competitor, bodybuilder, let's just make that comparison there. A female athlete at her peak is 19% body fat, 18% body fat, and a stage athlete is 10, 11%, right? So we're really talking right on the edge of being okay. And I can tell you that at one stage, my husband said, "You're blinking slower." And I was opening the cupboards and he's like, "Why are you in slow motion?" And there were moments that I had to keep sitting down. It is an extraordinary feeling. Your brain does not retrieve the information that you're looking for in a conversation as quickly as it does when you aren't that lean. My sleep really suffered, and I was fairly diligent about it. Seemed to be that if I could go to bed early enough, I could probably get 5 hours in, but without fail, I was waking up at 1:30 in the morning. It was
Right.
actually 1:36, bizarrely, every
Isn't
morning,
it weird how
same
you can get in a
time.
cycle like that?
Yeah, yeah. And it was, I would wake up and I wasn't particularly, I didn't feel stressed. I didn't have stressful thoughts. I didn't have symptoms of anxiety, but it was just my cortisol was like, "You're awake now." And 1:30 in the morning, it's just kind of like, what
That's
do
a
I
little
do at this
early.
point?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then, that's a red siren to pay attention to. Then we had the hormonal disturbances, and hormones are the precursor for building muscle. So, at that point, I'm not building any muscle. In fact, as the weight's dropping, I'm potentially losing tissue. And it's very hard to signal to the body when you're in a deficit for that length of time, "Please just take away my fat." It's going to be detracting the expensive luxury tissue because that's the one that needs, fuel.
Right.
And I have not only present day goals of feeling, my best and being participating in my life without blinking slowly and moving slowly and needing to sit down, but I also have goals of building more muscle and in performing, and I enjoy my training. So that's another very important reason why you can't stay that lean for so long. And I will also say, it was a real wake-up call to me because I grew up in countries. I grew up in South Africa and the Bahamas, and have traveled a lot and saw, huge discrepancies in people's wealth and resources that they had. And it was fascinating to me how difficult it was to function at that level of,
Oh
let's
yeah.
face it, controlled starvation,
Right.
where food is scarce. And that was really, because you hear all the talk from politicians of children who don't have food on the table really struggle at school, and it's kind of just generic talk, but it's real. It's really real. And so it was kind of fascinating to explore just how compromised I was.
Oh yeah. It is crazy how much that I know personally, and I don't think, I mean, I'm below 11% body fat, but relatively, I have not gotten as lean as you did there. I hope to within the next year. But uh I know when I've been my leanest, like the most recent photo shoot I did, it was crazy to, in the moment, I didn't really realize it, but afterwards in the reverse diet, see like, oh wow, I have so much more mental bandwidth. I can function so much better. I can respond so
Yeah,
much faster.
yeah.
These tasks seem so much smaller than they did before. But as you mentioned, like there's a lot of reasons that we don't necessarily want to live in that place year round. From a health perspective, from an internal health perspective, your sex hormones are going to be in the best place, right? If your body is sensing like, hey, we're drifting quite a lot closer to starvation than we want, it's kind of like this, like I don't know, starvation is this waterfall, right? And we're like the raft we're on is like getting pretty close to it. Okay, our body's fighting pretty hard to go in the opposite direction. Where when we reserve as many resources as we can with like, maybe it doesn't make sense for our sex hormones to be in a good place. Wouldn't make sense to conceive in this place, for example. Um, there's so much from like a quality of life perspective, just not feeling your best. We're not gonna be able to
Mm.
build very much muscle tissue there. Again, just energy levels, our sleep, everything's
Yeah.
gonna suffer a lot.
And this is really important, what I'm about to say, for those people, for a lot of the women that I coach. I wasn't even satisfied with that. You know, it still didn't feel like I was the leanest person I've ever been. And let me tell you, like, you can't lie back on the bath because your spine is pushing into the tub. And you're still thinking, I'm not satisfied. You know, that's the level of dysmorphia that we have as, I think, particularly as females, but I think men, you know, they're certainly men have it too. So it was such a light bulb moment for me, because I was like, wow, this isn't really about leanness,
Yeah.
you know, because I'm as lean as I'm going to get, and I'm still thinking there's more that I can do.
I think it's truly, again, just speaks to that idea that, hey, we do this because it's fun. We love to challenge ourselves. We love to push ourselves. We love the process of like the training.
Yeah.
And just it's fun to nerd out over. It's fun to push yourself. It's fun to see yourself continue to grow and progress. But if you tie any of your happiness or fulfillment that you get from this from
Yeah.
my result at any given time, that isn't going to be fulfilling, right? It's
Yeah.
similar to like, I'll be happy when I get to this place. Okay, we probably won't. There will probably
Yeah.
always be a goalpost
It's
that's moving.
completely detached those two connections for me, which is incredible.
But
So,
we are, and I think most of our clients are in a very similar place where it's like, I just love this. That's not because I like feel like I need to escape anything. It's just I love the process of this, and I think that's a much healthier place to approach it from. So
mm,
to follow up with that, how do you know when you've gained enough body fat? Because it does sound like, hey, we've already gained some body fat, and that's going to be a part of
mm,
getting back to a place where you do feel your best. How do you think
yeah.
personally you kind of tease out when you've gained enough?
It's going to be interesting to see, because actually we were just talking about this on our coaches call, when we were, you know, on Thursdays we review a lot of client calls and stuff, and the hunger cues are not necessarily relative to accuracy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
My I'm having to standardize my eating, and not necessarily pay attention to my hunger cues all the time, because you are just very, very hungry. Um, so how will I know when biofeedback will, you know, be in a better place. But this is an important carryover from a fat loss phase, from a deficit into a reverse diet, which is, um, you can get into a little bit of a panic of, I feel dreadful, I need food, right?
Mhm.
But there's no amount of food in this meal that is going to speed up recovery, right? So there's no amount of food that I can eat today that is going to make me feel better. What I've got to do is get through the next 2 to 3 to 4 or 5 weeks with standardized eating, with, you know, whole food choices of food, all that kind of stuff, and then I'm going to feel better.
Right.
So you just have to follow the plan,
That's a
because
really good way to put it.
you know what I mean? Because you can get into panic and think, well, I'll just eat everything right now and I'll feel better this evening. That's not going to be the case. You're still going to feel hungry this evening. You're still going to feel, you know, the compromised biofeedback this evening. So it's just, you've got to bide your time. You've got to bide your time.
Yeah. I remember the first photo shoot prep I did in 2018, which I didn't get nearly as lean as like the more recent one I did. But after that, and I think my food quality was a huge part of this. It's really interesting because I didn't notice the struggle nearly as much in the next like recovery phase afterwards. But in the first one, I remember like eating my pre-workout meal, going to the gym. And then this was like the first couple weeks post diet. And then I would come home and I was just so hungry. I would just eat and eat and eat. And it was like a lot of it
Mm,
was like rice cakes, for example. And I
yeah.
remember I would like track my food and it was like, man, I've eaten like 80% of my daily intake within the first couple hours of my day. And it
Mm,
still is like, it's still this drive to eat more. I don't necessarily even actually like, I don't feel a sensation of hunger in my stomach, but I just have this drive to eat. And that's like, again, I think that's a very good perspective in that there is
mm,
nothing I can do in this meal that can necessarily fix this. Now, I think an important caveat, an important thing to understand here is again, we're talking about someone who got very, very lean, well below sustainable levels of leanness. Will this process, will the reverse diet process be like this if you just like got to a lifestyle lean, right? Or within like what's sustainable? No, definitely not. Even if we like just tiptoed past that a bit, even if we did like a photo shoot level of leanness, probably not anything close to this degree. But the further we push it, the greater these things will be magnified.
mm. Yeah.
Okay.
So how will I know when I've gained enough body fat? I'm putting my hands in my coach, because and you know, I've been doing this for many years and I do it for other people, but I feel like we all have a wonky lens when we look at ourselves, you know. So I'm trusting my coach. And at the moment we are focused on not, you know, we're being cautious with the body fat, but we're more focused on, let's get sleep in a better place. Let's get uh, and I didn't mention that when you said, why can't you stay as lean as you did for stage? You know, I'm feeling very weak in the gym. I'm feeling a little bit of dread going to the gym. You know, I'm feeling I've got a lot of aches and pains, because when you get that lean, you're obviously taking body fat away from cushioning your joints. So lots of the niggles that had gone away in my 2-year maintenance phase. I tore my hamstring about 12 years ago. My left knee gets tight, you know, my jaw, and all of those things came back towards the end of the deficit, being super lean. So, you know, we want to get back into a place where I'm excited to go to the gym again. We want to get back into a place where I'm not waking up at 1:30 in the morning. We want to get back into a place, nobody talks about this, where, you know, I feel like having sex again. Your libido is tanked.
Right.
So you know, that is when we will know. And you know, this is an important thing. And you know, one of our fellow mentors, Brandon, did a really good podcast on this recently, which is the LEA, low energy availability. And it's really interesting because we're talking about it when I'm super lean for stage. But what we see in people who have spent a lot of time restricting food, and who aren't necessarily, they could be overweight, they could be obese to some extent, and they're still in a space of low energy availability. So and all those things are still tanked. So that is when we will know that my and when I worked with you for the first time a couple of years back, that was my story, is that I was in a space of low energy availability, and I wasn't even at my leanest. You know, I had just spent too long trying to you know, kind of restrict food, and we had to push body fat a little bit further than I was comfortable with, shall we say, even though I was still well within the realms of healthy body fat levels. But that, and I recall very clearly when you and I both knew, as coach and as lifestyle athlete, that we had found a sweet spot, because my training was feeling good. I was reporting that I was excited to go to the gym. My lifts were getting stronger. My sleep was in a good place. My PMS was better. And that was when we knew, okay, this is where we want to hold. And yes, it's a little bit softer than you want to be, you know, but number one, that's an interesting insight, is that, you know, the way you want to live has such a cost to it. Are you willing to pay the cost? And secondly, my shift around that was, oh, okay, I get this. My body, the environment of my body is like a jungle or a forest. And you don't expect the forest to stay green and beautiful all year round and perfect for taking a glorious Instagram picture in with the sun setting. It has to rain, the leaves have to get muddy on the floor, you know, the mud, it's like there are no leaves on the trees. You have to go through your fallow seasons in order to have those glorious moments. And that's how I now see the environment of the physique, is I'm not looking to create a physique that I'm going to fix upon. I'm looking to create a home that I can live in, that I'm willing to do the tidying up work of on a daily basis. And every now and again, I can have these glorious moments of a verdant forest.
The forest is beautiful.
Yeah, the forest is beautiful. You know, you could look at it like we live in our homes most of the year round, and then you go off to the Maldives for 2 weeks, and it's a big, you know, it's a big kind of like, you know, you spend way more money, you do less work, but you can't live like that year round, right? That's a luxury. And the most of the time is spent just chop wood, carry water, shall we say.
Yeah, and you also want that eventually, like, you don't want to stay in the Maldives forever. You eventually want to go back to your home, and you want it to be a home that you want to go back to as well. So, I mean, my follow-up question for that was going to be, how do you deal with not being your leanest all the time? But do you think we kind of answered the question there? Or are there any
Yeah,
other
I,
things
I, I didn't mean to. Sorry, Jeremiah.
No, that's
I jumped
okay.
the
That was
gun there, but that's
a very natural transition into that. I think that's
yeah.
very well said.
It was such a lovely feeling at the end of this deficit not to be fearful of gaining body fat. In fact, you know, knowing that that was absolutely what I needed to do. It's been such a different experience, you know, because I've done lots of nutritional phases. And I would say this is the first time that I've really felt the sensation of like um uh that job's done, on to the next kind of thing, with excitement as opposed
Yeah,
to fear.
no. And I think it's just something that a lot of people have to go through multiple phases of. I know I did to really feel like I could embrace it well and like be okay with that, like changing of the season, so to speak. But it does speak to something that people experience quite frequently. I think when finishing up the fat loss phase, especially if we're pushing for something like a competition or even a photo shoot prep, a lot of times there's kind of a lull after that, right? We see every week we're seeing like the scale drop, we're seeing ourselves get leaner, we're getting a lot of instant gratification. And then we're so focused on this one thing for a long period of time. And then
Mm.
once we've done the thing, there can kind of be like a drop off after that, a lull after that, where we're not as excited about things. What, if anything, are you doing to kind of deal with that, offset that? Do you have any thoughts there?
Well, I suppose, you know, that is kind of, it's a little bit different within the bodybuilding competitive world, because people get very excited to get back into the build, you know, and they know that they have to see the scale go up significantly, particularly if you're more advanced. The more advanced you are, probably the softer you're going to have to get, really, because you've run out of the newbie gains. So I can tell you that my fellow competitors were really excited about their off season, because that they're going to try to be more competitive next time. Now, I'm not sure I'm going to go down that route of repetitive combat. I'm also not sure I'm not going to, but you know, but I can really and I imagine this is very similar for, you know, a kind of fat loss phase. Is like you get really into a groove of things. And actually, I was saying to my husband yesterday, I cannot today, and we're only 3 weeks from the experience of the stage, and therefore roughly a 20-week deficit I did. I cannot today tell you how I fitted everything in.
Yeah.
You know, I can't tell you how I got my training in. I cannot tell you how I got my steps, and I cannot tell you how I got my cardio in. I can't tell you how I got the sort of the level of food prep in. And I'm only 3 weeks from the experience, but it's so, you know, to get a little bit yoga teachery on you, and that is my background. It's the yin to the yang. You can't do all out yang all the time. You have to have these seasons, a bit like I was talking about with the forest, in order to be able to you know, yang again, so to speak, when that opportunity comes around. And
You
I think
can't
it's
always
just
have your yang
practice.
out, they say.
Do they? You
Sorry,
just
go
made that
on.
up.
Go on, I'm sorry.
um yeah, so I don't I can see what you're saying about there potentially being a kind of a lull after something like that. And I remember when I got married, people said after the wedding, oh, you know, are you experiencing that kind of post-event blues? And I think I've just done a lot of practicing of letting go of things and realizing that there's a chapter for everything. And, you
Yeah.
know, you want to try and embrace the opportunities of each chapter rather than missing out on what came before, you know. So I can't say I have really experienced a lull. And also I think the amount of time that we tried to stay competition ready, which was that big gap between the two stages. Between the two competitions, I was so ready to sleep again. I was
Yeah.
so ready to love my training again, which, let me tell you, 3 weeks in, and I got the classic post-show sickness. We have a mentor called Dom Kuza, who has put a lot of people through very, very high level competitions. And we have a call with him every Thursday. We jumped on a call with him, and I was sick, and he kind of rolled his eyes and laughed a little bit. It was like, classic, she's sick after the show, because your immune system is also massively compromised. Every system in your body is compromised. And so I had the post-show sickness. And then following that, really I was in no space to train hard at all. And so it was really just a question of trying to go back to the gym, doing 3 sessions a week. I mean, I could, it's quite humbling when you've been pretty strong at some of your lifts. And then all of a sudden, both the brain regression, the strength regression, the niggles, the vulnerabilities. So I'm just really looking forward to loving my gym sessions again, which is taking some time at the moment.
Yeah, it sounds like you're taking a very stoic mindset to that as a whole, but also, and I think this is very important, finding the beauty and the enjoyment in every phase. And you kind of spoke to it with like life as a whole, right? With marriage, but it's similarly here. Like there are so many good things. That's where, again, I think the less you can attach yourself to this idea that I can't be happy with my physique. Like I can't enjoy being in my home unless I'm just my absolute leanest, just the more fun all of this becomes. And it does become something where like, hey, we can love the building phases. We can enjoy the building phases, the maintenance phases, whatever they are, just as much. Right. It's like we're building our home. And that like we can enjoy the process of it just as much as we can. Like, I mean, like us renovating the house, we're renovating a house right now, right? And if it's just like I've hated the last year of this, I'm gonna like when it's all done, I'm going to like do a like I don't know a fixer upper reveal and like I just have the moment where it's like, oh my gosh, the house is so beautiful. And that's the only time I ever enjoy it, right? Then it's
Mm.
then it's like, what's the point of all this? So I think the
Yeah.
less we can
I
attach to
had
that,
a
the
really
better.
interesting question from one of my clients who's not from this sort of world of bodybuilding at all, and very much a lifestyle client, and loved her question. It wasn't asked with any judgment at all, but she was like, how do you feel about people judging you on the way you look? And I was like, that's such an interesting question because, if I said to you, okay, you're going to have a party, you and you would dress up your home with dining, laying the table and putting some things up and da da da. That's not how your home looks all the time, but you've made an effort to share your kind of aesthetics and what you enjoy, and you'll put some music on and you'll make a playlist, but your home's still your home. When you take that decoration down, it just, you've peaked it for the party. And then when the party's over, it's back to muddy shoes and dog hair on the sofa kind of thing. But you can still, I love my home when I'm throwing a party and I'm laying out beautiful food and putting the good glasses out and whatever. But I also love my home when it's blankets and dog hair, So there's something to love about every phase.
I think that's incredibly well put. Our couch is always covered in dog hair as well and mud and everything, but I wouldn't want it any other way.
Yeah.
Any other like I think honestly, I think we've covered most everything that I wanted to cover here pretty well. Are there any final points that you wanted to dig into that you think are most relevant before we wrap this up?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Well, hopefully this was helpful for the listener. I think it was a really good conversation. We honestly went in a little bit different direction than I expected, but I really think such a good conversation around how to kind of embrace and enjoy this process, this phase after the fat loss phase, which oftentimes is the most difficult. Again, I do want to make sure it's clear because I think that a lot of times like little snippets of sound bites gets taken and like misapplied. And you can almost kind of placebo yourself into like, oh, I feel like shit. I've lost a lot of strength, etc. And this is all pretty now, not the mindset side of things, not the setting new goals, but like the biofeedback and those things. Those are going to be again specific to someone who got extremely lean, right? Where again, if we're like pushing to a lifestyle lean, your reverse diet process should be pretty manageable, pretty easy. Like we're not gonna, by no means should we be like losing strength and losing a lot of muscle or anything of the sort. So again, I want to make sure that's clear because it does oftentimes get misinterpreted. But yeah, that's what we have for y'all for today. As always, thank you all for tuning in. If you've enjoyed the show, please do us a huge favor, leave us a 5-star rating or review. It just helps us reach more people. I will put Taz's Instagram link in the show notes as always. Highly recommend giving her a follow. If you'd like to apply for coaching with our team, just click the link in the show notes as well. That'll all be there. And we will catch you all next time.